Hello, everybody. Welcome back to One Sustainability, our 2022 conference. Our next segment is called Turning Sustainability into Sustainable Business Advantage. And we're joined today from San Francisco by Ryan Baum and from Dallas by Jeanette Chantalot. And I will let you guys introduce yourselves and hand it off over to you and be back on the concluding side. Thank you. Welcome.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Glenn. Yeah, it's so great to be a part of this conference. Over the course of this week, y'all have such an amazing set of things put together and talks from amazing people. And we're looking forward to actually being early here in the program as a way to sort of kick things off and give some framing for, in particular, for how some of this shows up in corporations and how to actually make sure that the work that's being done at companies is actually having the most impact. So we're going to give a talk called Turning Sustainability into a Sustainable Business Advantage. And before we get going too far into it, maybe we'll just quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Ryan Baum. I am a partner at Jump Associates. Jump is a strategy and innovation firm, and we help companies figure out new ways to grow. We help them figure out new ways to create new businesses or to transform their existing businesses in ways that will really set them up for the future. And so that may look like, if Samsung is trying to figure out what's the future of 5G and what should we be building from a business perspective in order to thrive in that future? Or if a healthcare company is trying to figure out, hey, we need to get better at serving the sickest of the sick patients, the folks who have really, really deep, difficult to serve needs, but we need to do it in a way that meets those needs and also really continues to allow us to do that in the long term, drive our business forward in a way that allows us to be able to continue to do that for the long term. Those are the kinds of things that Jump tends to work on. They call us for those kinds of problems. And what you notice about those is a lot of those things, I tend to work on a lot of these like complicated ecosystem problems where there's many different players and government regulation, and it makes it really hard to actually make change, right? And so trying to figure out how to help organizations do that. And that is how I actually came across Jeanette, and we got connected on a very similar challenge where we were working on that in the sustainability space, because as you can imagine, many of the challenges that you all are facing, I'm sure you're nodding at your screens, because they are those same kinds of things, these difficult ecosystem problems where there's so many different pieces and regulations and things like that. And to make change, you got to do something a little bit different. And Jeanette is awesome at doing that kind of stuff. And so I'll let her introduce herself.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Really happy to join you all today. And my role at KC, Kimberly-Clark, is really about how we focus on innovation and sustainability, the strategies, the capabilities, and programs in order to deliver against our consumers' needs and business growth. At Kimberly-Clark, our purpose is to deliver better care for a better world. And when we think about that, and all of our brands in our portfolio, all of those brand purposes ladder up to that better care for a better world. And so when we think about how we grow, this is our 150-year anniversary at Kimberly-Clark, as we've grown for the last 150 years and we look ahead to the next 150, really delivering on that better world piece is instrumental to our pathway. And then when we think about all of our consumers that we serve all around the world, all of the stakeholders involved in our business, you think about how deeply they care about a better world, the people and planet. All of this creating, shared value is incredibly important to how we innovate and how we grow. So excited to talk about how we think about sustainability and innovation and turn it into a true business advantage.
Awesome. And we'll talk in just a moment, because I think it's particularly interesting that innovation and sustainability are both two parts of your title. I think that's particularly relevant to the things that we're talking about here today. So, okay, so let's dive in. I mean, the things that Jeanette and I work together on are really big future-focused initiatives about how do we actually shift the future? How do we think about where things are headed, in particular from a sustainability perspective? And here's the nice thing about sustainability, is that sustainability is pretty future focused, right? It's not getting so bogged down in all the things of today. Like if you look at the headlines, in order to do this right, it requires a future focused mindset, right? Look at these dates. on these, this is just a pull of some random headlines from, it's about, Levi Strauss eyes net zero emissions by 2050. Kimberly-Clark reports progress toward its 2030 sustainability. Like the US building sector aims for net zero emissions by 2040. Or half the global reefs may be unsuitable by 2035, or China aims for carbon neutrality by 2060. These are far out dates. Sometimes, at the best, they're 7 years out. They're 37 years out, right? Which is wonderful because we're actually thinking long-term, or trying to think long-term, or at least communicating long-term. But that also comes with its own set of challenges, right? Because the average tenure of an executive at a company is 5 years. And so we're setting goals for things that many of us will not actually have the chance to see to full fruition, right? And not only that, but if you think about it, these things that are longer term, this future-focused mindset that is necessary to do sustainability is difficult. And part of the reasons why it's difficult is that people are psychologically wired to focus on the present. I mean, here's the thing. There's been a lot of research about this kind of thing from Zimbardo or Boyd, and Jump has done its own set of research around this. But if you look at the spread of the population, there's probably about 14% of the population that are past focus. They're saying things like, don't worry, this is all just a blip. When they look at taxis, they say, Uber, it's just a blip. Like taxis are going to come back. It's okay. Like let's just stay the course, right? And you hear some of this in the sustainability world too, around technology and how technology isn't actually all that bad. Those kinds of things. These are arguments that seem very past focused, right? There's about 14% of the population that's that. Here's about another 16% of the population who are future focused. These are the folks who are like, things are changing. They're shouting it from the hilltops. They're saying, we need to get going. We need to start making change. We need to do something differently. I would imagine the population who I'm speaking to here may skew a little bit more in that direction. And I do think sustainability-oriented folks do tend to think a little bit more in that way. The challenge is with the other 70%, right? The 70% of us who are present focused, who basically have this unique characteristic of being able to agree that the world is changing, understand that the world is changing, but say, yeah, that may be happening, but we need to focus on making this quarter's numbers, right? And I'm sure many of you are probably also like now banging your heads against your computer screen, because I'm sure you face that all the time. The idea that, yeah, I agree, the world is changing. It's going to be important, but we need to focus on today, right now, so that we can have the chance to actually get to that or invest more heavily in that in the future, right? And sometimes it's about like focusing on this quarter. Sometimes it's let's let somebody else figure out all the difficult parts of it first, so that we can then, piggyback on that and do the same thing, those kinds of things. But that type of thinking is really difficult. Makes it really difficult to get the kinds of things that you all want to get done in organizations. And if we actually take the quote from Robert Swan, our polar explorer friend, it's really important to recognize that the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it, or we can save it in the future, or something like that, right? Because these kinds of things, these kinds of challenges, they require action today, but they actually will start showing their payoff long into the future, right? Long after many of us retire or are done with our careers, right? And so the challenge with that then becomes, how do you make these future-focused sustainability initiatives, the things that we care about in terms of making for our planet, for our world, how do we make them feel more pressing to a company today? How do we make sure that those things start to feel pressing and we can start to take action on them? And that's a really big challenge for many leaders of sustainability at organizations, right? And part of the answer to that comes down to an answer of mindset. What is the mindset that we are permeating our organizations with related to sustainability, right? And so what I mean by that is, for better or for worse, for a long time, whether we recognize it or not, we primarily associate the word sustainability with the word sacrifice, right? The idea of good for the planet versus good for the business. If I do something today, I could be doing something a little bit better or a little like for my business, or there could be a different way that I'm doing this that would be better for me now, but I'm going to make a little bit of a sacrifice in order to do something that's good for the planet. And that is, you know, in many cases, if folks are consistent, if leadership is consistent and maintains its goals, if like everything is going well, that can be an acceptable way to do some short-term things. But if we're going to make these sustainability initiatives actually thrive in the long term, we have to shift away from that. We have to stop getting caught in that, you know, tragedy of the commons thinking that there is a this versus this, because it's incredibly important to shift to a mindset more of value. That good for the planet is actually good for the business, right? And you know, there are so many examples of doing things that are right for the planet that are good for the business. You can see them in many corporate environments, but even if I just take this, you know, small set of stuff that I've worked on, these initiatives can really hedge against ballooning material costs. They can open up new markets. They can drive differentiation in a crowded market. They can speed up new customer adoption, and on and on and on. But it's really critical that we think that way. And it's critical that we communicate that way, because if we don't, if even in our language that we use, we start to go back and fall back to that language of sacrifice, what ends up happening is that as soon as money gets tight or we hit a recession, like what everyone is predicting that we're going to do in the next few months, right? Like if that kind of thing happens, all of a sudden these things get like quietly like less and less funding over time. Or, you know, the 5-year tenure of an executive, when that executive's up and a new person is in with different initiatives, if we haven't actually aligned good for the planet with good for the business, then those initiatives start to die. They start to, and nobody's making a big announcement that now we're not going after sustainability. That's not what's happening. But they just don't get the amount of support or the resources or the things they need to actually thrive. So this is where y'all come in. This is where it's incredibly important. The things that you can do to shift your organization from a mindset of sacrifice around sustainability to a mindset of value around sustainability is by shifting the role that you play in your company, right? And what I mean by that is you have to start to think about yourself as the sustainability leader, as the business architect, the sustainability leader as the person who is actually thinking about how to drive new business at the organization and aligning that mindset of good for the planet with the mindset of good for the business. And that strategic business architect, the business architect has a set of tools that they use, right? The sets of tools that a business architect or somebody who's creating new businesses uses are things like strategic assessments, right? That's one tool that you often hear, right? This idea of attaching sustainability objectives to larger corporate goals, larger company goals. There's really only 3 things that any company focuses on at any given time. And if you can align the stuff that you're doing with one of those big things, all of a sudden you're going to actually drive attention, right? Or P&L statements. The sustainability leader should get really good at building profit positive P&L statements that show how the work that they're doing will actually drive the business forward, right? And it's not necessarily about making profit. It's more about the idea that if you do that, the work that you're doing is going to continue to get the attention and drive, and you're going to be able to complete the work that you do that takes a long time. That, you know, you have this future focused initiative. If you actually have a profit positive P&L for the work that you're doing, you'll start to be able to complete that work as opposed to having it, you know, slowly be funded when times get tough. A third thing is experiment plans. New business architects are really good at finding the little micro leverage points in the hypotheses that they have made and testing those on a small scale, testing out all those little pieces before making the massive investment in the new material or the new technology or things like that. Test out all the components first to make sure that it works. The fourth one, stakeholder insights, knowing something unique about all the different players in the ecosystem and making sure that you can actually play into those things in a compelling way. And then the last one is about partnerships, which is about getting good at building and vetting strategic relationships. Okay, so those 5 things, if you can do that, you can actually turn sustainability into a business advantage. And that is something that I love about Jeanette, because I love that is like, she is so good in her role at actually thinking like that and actually shifting organizations like that, her organization like that. And so what I wanted to do is just like, Jeanette, maybe I think you should just start by telling folks like, how did you get to your role? And why is innovation and sustainability in the same role?
Yeah, it's thanks for that. And I first want to acknowledge that what you talked about earlier around the trade-off is so true. I mean, I fully ascribe to the idea that we cannot see things as a trade-off. We have to make it so that we know that it is really about doing well by doing good. And so this is where, in the future, they have to live hand in hand. And so while it might feel like a trade-off today, when you're future focused, you see how they start to converge and you see the benefit for the full stakeholder view. But as a bit of my journey, I actually started over 20 years ago in R&D. So I've always sort of been in this innovation R&D scientist engineer mindset from early in my career. And from there, you're always looking for how to solve solutions, or how do you identify solutions for the biggest problems? How do you understand consumer needs, stakeholder needs? And so that's sort of always been ingrained in me. I've also worked in new ventures and incubation. So how do you take some of these new ideas that have different business models and different revenue models and really think about the best way to test and learn through those processes and bring value to the customers as well as the business? I also have moved into business and marketing and really learned from the ground up around the marketing fundamentals and what drives business growth and what are the levers you can pull throughout the P&L in order to make sure that we have the right decisions today, but also into the future. So when I think about the challenge we face with innovation and sustainability in particular, highly complex, highly multidisciplinary. That's sort of been my journey to date. And at Kimberly-Clark have been really fortunate to work with a large group of amazing individuals that are very passionate about meeting consumer needs, meeting needs of our community and our planet. And honestly, everything that we've done to date has been through the work of many, many, many teams across the organization in different functions and coming together to solve those problems. You asked, why innovation and sustainability? Why those two areas in one role? And I'd say we can't have a conversation about innovation without having sustainability as part of it, and vice versa. They're inextricably linked. And when you think about innovation, and as you know well, Ryan, it's really about understanding needs. It's understanding consumer needs, stakeholder needs, really building empathy, solving problems, creating solutions that improve lives. And so when you think about what innovation is at its heart, it's really about, solving those jobs to be done. And with sustainability, the job is clear. The solution is often complicated, and there are multiple aspects to the solution, but the goal is clear. And so that's a lot of why I think when you combine them together, you get a much more holistic strategy, and it forces our teams collectively to think about solutions that satisfy multiple criteria.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love that it plays very much into this idea that, if you come up through the business and through innovation, you naturally, as a sustainability leader, are thinking about all of these different components, how to run experiments, how to actually build a P&L that actually supports it, how to actually think about the stakeholders more broadly, how to think about partnerships or strategic assessments. Are there any example? I mean, maybe just like an example or something like that of like some way that this shows up for you?
Yeah, I think there's a number across Kimberly-Clark, and we're finding new solutions every day as we go. But part of it is, like you said, really understanding all aspects of the business, and so understanding all of the stakeholders across the value chain, that's really critical. And so An example our Kimberly-Clark professional team has done an amazing job with is they've started over many, many years building solutions that it's out today. It's called Right Cycle, where it's actually a circular model where they can actually find ways to actually partner with customers to recycle the post-use material. And so that is a huge advancement in circularity, serving customer needs, because we know customers are looking for more ways to drive sustainability, and serving consumer needs and user needs. And so really thinking about delivering a holistic solution has really been something that the Kimberly-Clark professional team has done an amazing job with. And it doesn't happen overnight. They've been working on this for many years to really build out what works for the whole business model. And we've seen that in our consumer business as well, a number of different examples around the world. But it takes experimentation, it takes understanding the P&L and where we want to go.
Yeah, and understand the mill workers and all the facilities managers, and actually go out there and test in the UK and find ways to bring on new customers that'll build new P&L statements for them. It's very much an example of that kind of thing, right? And I think it's a really compelling way to think about that.
Absolutely.
So as we I mean, some of the things that Jeanette, I know you have seen many times, we've talked about this before, but some of the common pitfalls that folks often think about, or misconceptions, I guess, when thinking about this stuff, is one is like thinking that attracting new customers is going to be enough, right? It is not. Attracting new customers is great, but then sustainability starts to fall under a marketing expense, right? And oftentimes, if it just falls under a marketing expense, it's not actually going to have the juice that it needs to thrive. And so it's just attracting new customers will be a big part of your financial model, but it can't be the whole thing. And that's also true for the second point, that the value from the waste stream is not going to be enough to pay for itself. Like, there's a reason, the transportation costs, all those kinds of things, bringing stuff back will not be enough. Even if you're building a circular solution, it's not enough. Like, it needs to be a combination of a lot of those different things. And the same thing goes for, just because the company made a pledge, we talked about this before, it doesn't necessarily mean that will outlast recessions and changes in executives and all those kinds of things. Right? And the fourth one is that if we get it right for customers, the rest of the ecosystem is going to get behind it, right? That is, we found that many times that, I think, to give a different example, if you're building an electric vehicle ecosystem, which some of the work we've done before, if you study consumers, you can get it right for consumers, but you're still not going to take off, because one of the biggest barriers to an electric vehicle ecosystem taking off is actually dealer networks, right? Because they get incentivized in a very specific way for when things break down, they make a lot of their money on aftermarket parts and sales, and electric vehicles don't require that as much, right? So thinking about that broad set of stakeholders is really important. And then the other piece is, don't try to own all the pieces of the solution. If you own all the pieces of the solution yourself, it often, people often think, oh man, if I could just, if we can make a better material than that other company did by starting from scratch. And sometimes it's just better to find ways to partner, figure out where you strategically need to differentiate, and then partner for the rest of the stuff. So the key things that we wanted to leave you with, if you wanted to write a to-do list at the end of this, first thing in your to-do list for getting your company behind these like future-focused sustainability initiatives. Number one, tie it to the business's overall strategic goals for today. What are the things that are being shared on the shareholder calls or those kinds of things, and tie to those things, link in, because it'll make sure that your stuff has juice. The second one, debunk company lore with emotional experiences. One of the best ways to get people to think about the future is to give them an emotional experience, not just an analytical one. I mean, I remember one of the biggest challenges to doing things in the world of paper recycling was whether the waste stream is clean enough. And I remember just reams and reams of data, showing people reams and reams of data. Look, the waste stream is clean enough. But it wasn't until we just collected the trash from the building for a week, put it out on a patio, and brought a bunch of executives out to sort trash that they're like, oh my gosh, there's not that much dirty stuff in here. We could actually maybe do something with this. And it changed a way to force people into action, right? The third one we've talked a little bit about is understand those implicit and explicit motivations of all of the different players in the ecosystem. Fourth one is about building that P&L, that profit positive P&L, or to make sure that you can show that this thing will have value. And then the fifth one is to run low-cost experiments to test all of your assumptions. Jeanette, your take on these things, anything that's sticking out?
Yeah, every time I see these, I definitely am nodding along because so much of this is true, and a lot of it is tied to the fact that we have to make sure we run those experiments and really test those hypotheses, because if we can test those hypotheses, we are automatically debunking, company lore, or, sort of sometimes we use red team thinking and we say the lies we tell ourselves. And it's just a way of saying, sometimes there are some preconceived assumptions that we just need to test out. And innovation and sustainability is all about pushing the status quo and saying, wait a second, or questioning the status quo and saying, wait a second, how true is that? And it allows us to unlock our creativity, allows us to find new solutions. And when you do that alongside the P&L, then you're starting to build something new. And so I think that's true of many different examples and across many different industries and companies. So those are all very true, and we live them every day.
Totally. So we'll just leave you, we will leave you with this, that the best way that you as a sustainability leader can make long-term impact on the planet is by building a business model that actually thrives today. And that will actually drive your business forward, and it'll drive your goals of doing right by the planet forward as well, right? And so if you have further questions, I know we're up on time here, but if you do have further questions or want to reach out, you can reach me here at ryan@jumpassociates.com, or of course, if you'd like, I can connect you to Jeanette if you want to reach out to Jeanette too. But thanks so much, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. I know there's a ton of amazing content here, but I hope that you remember, think about it as not a sacrifice. It is about a value equation, and if you build what's right for the business and you think about yourself as a business architect, you can actually drive your initiatives forward a whole heck of a lot better.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jeanette. Great job. Just great job. A couple quick comments just from me. I love the whole holistic approach to what you're doing. I think that's fantastic. I love the quote, "Where do you want to go?" Right? Because you're really, when you think about it, as you said, the average executive's term is 5 years. You're building a mindset, you're building infrastructure 20, 25 years, 30 years into the future. And if that doesn't become part of your DNA, then it just becomes a program. And then we certainly don't want that. And better care for a better world. What a great corporate motto there, Jeanette. So thank you very much. So great job, Ryan Baum from Jump Associates and Jeanette Chantalot from Kimberly-Clark. Thank you for joining us at One Sustainability. Great talk, great conversation. Wish you the best of luck going in the future, and look forward to seeing you guys next time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.